Okay, so now that we have our game set up, we need to spawn a lot of objects, okay? So whenever you add in a variable for a player or projectile, you have to add in your own function to make it work here. So first things first is we're going to spawn our player, okay? Now, function will spawn player here. And before we get started, we need to talk a little bit about the type of game that we're making. We're making a game where the enemies can collide with the player and the projectiles can collide with the enemy. In SpriteKit, if you need any kind of collision, and this is any kind of collision, you need to add in physics. Whether those physics work with real life physics, like for example, dropping a box or anything like that, what this is that you need to add in physics. So in order to add in physics, we need to go up to our SK scene and we're going to say SK physics contact delegate. Sounds like a mouthful, but all this is saying is that this will add in the SpriteKit functionality to add in the physics contact. We also need to add in physics world, okay, and physics world dot contact delegate is equal to self, okay, and what that's going to do is that is going to allow us to have physical connections, okay, and then we also need to add in a struct here. All right, so let's go ahead and let's add that in here. We'll say struct, and we'll call this physics category. Okay, and we're going to say static let. We're going to call this player is equal to 0. We're going to go static let. We're going to say projectile is equal to 1. Static let. We got player projectile. We have the enemy is equal to 2. You can start with 1 or 2, but the way this works is that, for example, if the player collides with the enemy, to the computer it means 0 collides with 2. It's registering this as a number here. Now the other thing that we need to do is we also need to make these uint 32s. Now what's a uint 32? Well, it's a 32-bit integer, but for your purposes, you need to just understand that the type of data that we're going to be connecting with these other pieces of data here are going to be uint32s. And you can technically make these variables here. This struct is just something that's kind of fun to put up here. So we now have our data that we're setting up. We now need to go and spawn the player here. So first things first is we're going to go to player is equal to sk, and then we're going to say sprite node. Now here you have two options. You can either bring in an image or you can start off with a color and a size. Okay, so within here we're going to say the color for this is going to be orange custom color, and the size here we're going to actually go and add in some sizes. Okay, so let's hop up to the top here. Let's add in a variable here. We'll call this player size is equal to CG size. Okay, so we're going to add in the player size here, and we'll make the player 50 by 50. Okay, and while we're here, let's add in the projectile, the enemy, and the star size. And let's call it star, because we'll be spawning one star at a time. So we'll say var player, this will be projectile size is equal to CG size. Again, width and height, let's make it 10 by 10, fairly small. Let's add in another variable here. We'll say that the variable is enemy size. Make that equal to CG size, and there'll be, we'll make it 40 by 40. And lastly here, we'll go to star size is equal to CG point. And the reason why we're doing that is that we're going to be randomizing the star size. And you'll see how we're going to do that here. So let's hop back down to the player here, and the CG size, we're going to go to player size. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to player.size is equal to CG size, is equal to player size. And you're probably wondering why we're doing this. Well, remember, if we want to add in our SK sprite node and you want to add in an image, if you add in a color, for example, you have to add in a size. But if there's an image here, you want to add in your own image, which we will be doing, we don't add in a size, okay? So there's other items you can do here, but essentially what it's saying here is that you need to add in the size manually if you're going to bring in images. So we might as well change it here. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is we need to add in a position here. So let's go to player.position is equal to a CG point. Okay. Now a CG point is a point on the screen. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say that this is CG rect get mid x self.frame. And what self.frame is going to do is that it's going to put it right in the middle. And remember, x is across, y is up and down. So for the y here, we could probably put it at 130. Now we can change this number here, but we're essentially going to put it somewhere at the bottom. And what 130 is somewhere at the bottom. All right. Now we need to add in some physics here. Okay, so we're going to say player.physicsBody is equal to sk physicsBody. Okay, sk physicsBody, and we're going to say rectangle of size, and we're going to go to player.size. Okay, and what that's going to do is that's going to set the size of our item here. Now, one thing that I should mention is that we do need to unwrap this value, so we're just going to add in the exclamation point there, and we also need to add in a bracket. Okay, so that fixes the problem. And Swift changes all the time, and 6 months ago what I typed out worked, but now we have to add in some more code. You can always fix it, there is no shame in that. And we can say player.physicsBody.affected by gravity is equal to false, because we do not want it to be affected by gravity. Player.category.physicsBody.category bitmask is equal to physics category dot player. Okay, what this is going to do is it's going to assign that number that we talked about earlier. Dot physicsBody dot contact test bitmask is equal to physics category dot we're going to say enemy because that's the main contact here. We're also going to go to player dot physicsBody dot allows rotation is equal to false. Okay, and then we're going to go to player.physicsBody.dynamic is equal to false as well. All right, now we're going to add in a player.name is equal to player name. Now, the reason why we do that is that one of the best ways to move data across and out of this function here is to add in a name to this player here. And this means that this object is now associated with this string, and you can compare that in an if statement. More on that later, but for now let's go ahead and let's set it up. Now lastly, we're going to go to self.addChild and we're going to go to player exclamation point. You need to do that or else it will not work. Let's hop up to the top here in our game scene and let's add in our spawn player. And what this is going to do is it's going to spawn the player. All right, so we now have a player that's set up, and we now have a player that's set up with physics. It's pretty cool. All right, this concludes the tutorial.